Hello, everyone. I hope you've all had a great weekend and are really feeling like you're learning a lot about Photoshop so far. We're going to start getting into some of the more advanced topics. So, today we're going to be starting with talking about adjustment layers. Adjustment layers sit above the standard image layers and act as overlays that can adjust brightness, contrast, hue, saturation, and more without directly affecting the actual image. This is invaluable because it allows us to experiment and fine tune our edits, maintaining the flexibility to tweak or remove changes at any stage of the editing process. Understanding how to use adjustment layers effectively can significantly improve our workflow, giving us greater creative control and precision while preserving the quality of the original image. First, we will be downloading our example photo for this lesson, Pouring of Water on Happy Woman by Kayla Malie. Now, let's go over what some icons around the layers windows are that I didn't cover in the layers lesson. In the future, this will be covered directly in the layers lesson, but this is important for you all to know now. So at the top of the layers panel is the layer filter. This works like a search filter you might use on a shopping site like Amazon. By default, it is set to kind, which allows you to select the type of layer in the icons beside it. For example, you could select pixel layers or adjustment layers or text layers. Using the layer filter can be useful if you're working in a document that has a lot of layers. However, I find that organization using layer groups and proper layer naming can usually works best for me. Below the layer filter is the layer blending modes and layer opacity. Layer blending modes are a way to affect how the layer blends with the layers below it. For example, the blending mode multiplies the base color by the blend color to create a darker result, while the screen blending mode does the opposite. Put simply, multiply makes white transparent, while screen makes black transparent. We will be covering blending modes in more detail in a future lesson. Layer opacity works much the same as brush opacity. At 100% opacity, the layer is fully visible, while making it lower makes it more and more transparent. Layer fill works similarly to layer opacity with one main difference. While opacity will change the transparency of everything that is in the selected layer, fill will change the transparency of whatever is filling the layer but will ignore any layer effects that have been applied to it. We will be covering layer effects in a future lesson as well. To the left of layer fill are different lock options. These lock options are lock transparency, lock image pixels, lock position, prevent auto nesting, and lock all. Lock transparency confines editing to the opaque portions of the layer. I use this a lot if I'm working with, say, line art for an illustration, and I want to color the line art in specific ways, kind of similar to Disney films. This allows me to directly paint without having to worry about changing the fidelity of my line art. Then we have lock image pixels, which prevents any modification of the layer's pixels using the painting tools. Then we have lock position, which prevents layers pixels from being moved. And then we have prevent auto nesting, which is a relatively new feature in Photoshop, as Photoshop has only recently started introducing artboards that were more common in Illustrator and InDesign previously. This prevents any layers you create from automatically nesting within the artboard that you might create. However, you might not use artboards at all. You might just be using documents. So you might not need to worry about this one at all. And then there is lock all. This locks all of the above, and this makes the layer unable to be manipulated in any way. This can be useful for reference layers or any layer that you really don't want to be messed with at all. If one of the options above is active on a layer, the layer will show an outlined icon of a lock on it. If it has lock all active, then the lock will be a filled white or black depending on your color mode. To remove a lock, you can either unselect it from the lock options or click the lock and drag it to the trash can in the lower right-hand corner of the layers panel. Next, we have the layer list. This will show us the layers currently present in the open document. On the left-hand side of each layer is an icon of an eye. This manages visibility of layers. Clicking on it will make the layer invisible. Clicking on the empty square left behind will make the layer visible again. At the bottom of the layers panel are various layer actions. They are link layers, layer effects, layer mask, adjustment layers, layer group, new layer, and delete layer. Link layers allows layers to be linked together so they can be moved and manipulated together, regardless of their positioning within the layers panel. So they can be several layers apart and still be manipulated together. This can be really useful for certain effects. Layer effects are various effects you can add to a layer, such as color overlays and shadows. Again, we'll be covering these in more detail in a future lesson, but feel free to explore them if that sounds interesting to you. We've already talked a little bit about layer masks, but this is another way to apply them. Clicking on the layer masks button here will allow you to manipulate the mask directly rather than starting from a selection. Adjustment layers, which we will be talking about after we are done discussing this, adjust color, brightness, and other options without directly changing layers below. Then we get to layer group. This creates a sort of folder within your layers panel and allows you to put layers inside this group. This is really great for organizational purposes, or if you want certain effects or adjustment layers to affect all layers within a group. Then we have new layer, which allows you to create new layers within the document. These layers by default will be blank, but you can fill them with whatever color you wish and manipulate them directly using the tools within Photoshop. Then we have the delete layer. This does exactly what you think it does. It deletes layers, but it can also be used to delete various effects and statuses and various things that layers are affected by. Feel free to give it a try because you can always Command Z to bring stuff back. Just make sure you don't save and close the document before restoring what you might have lost. Okay, that should cover what we didn't cover in the layers lesson proper. Now, let's get back to our actual lesson for today. So today we're going to be talking about adjustment layers. To create your first adjustment layer, we'll start by navigating to the layers panel. At the bottom of this panel, click the new adjustment layer button and select the type of adjustment you want to apply. The adjustment layer icon looks like a circle split in half, one half black and one half white, with a plus and minus sign in each. Kind of a little bit like a yin-yang symbol if it was very geometrical. This action will add an adjustment layer to our project, and from here we can manipulate our image non-destructively. If we need to undo or make changes, we can easily do so as adjustments are not permanent until we save the final version of our image. The adjustments options will appear in the Properties panel above the Layers panel on the right-hand side of Photoshop when you select the adjustment layer in the Layers panel. There are many adjustment layers in Photoshop. Here is a quick overview of them and what they do when they are applied to an image. Color and vibrance enhances muted colors. Brightness and contrast lightens or darkens and increases contrast. Levels adjust shadows, midtones, and highlights. And curves act similarly but with a finer control over the tonal range. Exposure corrects exposure, offset, and gamma, similar to how you might adjust a camera's exposure. Hue and saturation shifts colors and saturation within an image. Color balance changes overall color cast, usually based on shadows, midtones, and highlights. Black and white converts the below layers into monochrome and allows you to adjust the tones individually. Photo filter applies warming or cooling lens effects to the below layers. Channel mixer rebalances color channels. Color lookup applies cinematic or creative looks to the below layers. Selective color adjusts very specific color ranges that you can select within it. Invert reverses colors to create a negative sort of effect. Posterize reduces an image to flat color levels, creating a sort of old school comic book effect. Threshold converts to high contrast black and white, similar to posterize, but in a very much more dramatic way. Gradient map maps tones to gradient colors. While solid color fills with a single color, gradient fills with a smooth gradient, and pattern fills with a repeated design. Now, that's a lot of them, and you're going to need to experiment a bit to kind of figure out which ones will be most useful to your work. For me, the ones I tend to use the most often in my work are color and vibrance, curves, solid color, and gradient. Curves, especially, is powerful at adjusting color and tone of an image once you understand how manipulating it affects your image. Solid color and gradient, when used alongside layer blending modes, can unify an image through subtle color shifts or be used to create dramatic artistic effects. I definitely encourage you to use this assignment to really experiment and see how these ones will affect and which ones you like the most. So, for the submission part of this assignment, I want you to use 3 different adjustment layers on this image. I want to still see the general gist of the image, so don't obscure it by using a solid color, gradient, or pattern without combining them with a blending mode. One easy suggestion if you do wish to experiment with solid color, gradient, or pattern alongside blending mode is to use the overlay or soft light blending modes. These ones are a little bit more subtle and may give you a very interesting effect when combined with these adjustment layers. Once you are done creating your adjustments on this image, I want you to save it as your first name and your last name adjustment layers assignment, PSD. For example, mine would be Susie Crane adjustment layers assignment.psd. Then I want you to place this document within your AVC 177 Google Drive folder and within the folder called assignments there. Once you have placed this document, I want you to copy a link to it and paste it within the Canvas assignment box. Then submit the assignment, and that will finish your part in this assignment. I hope you felt that you learned a lot, and as always, if you have any questions or concerns, you are free to contact me on Canvas. I'll see you at the next lesson.